Boert's book is 1978, and he comes out with a chapter. Actually, the intro is Richard Condon, who wrote Manchurian Candidate. Interesting. And Manchurian Candidate, right around the time, right before, if I recall, JFK assassination. Isn't that right? Right before. Condon makes a good point at the beginning by pointing out that he says, hey, handlers are real. Secret police and secret societies and espionage, this has gone on, counterintelligence agencies in countries since the beginning of time. So why would it be strange that there's such a thing as espionage and conspiracy? Are you familiar with espionage? Have you ever heard of this? This has gone on since the beginning of time. It's the second oldest profession in the world, spying. It's not a conspiracy theory to talk about the history of espionage. Condon says, look, handlers, secret police, this was all real. When I wrote Manchurian Candidate, all of this was in my mind. And Condon even quotes Brzezinski, the famous quote from Brzezinski's 1973 book, Between Two Ages, which we've covered many times here, about the creation of the programmed human being. And that the programmed human being on the macro level in society is really no different than the programmed individual in mind control projects and experiments, right? What Brzezinski shows us, and Brzezinski, of course, went to McGill University, which was one of the hubs of MKUltra. So Brzezinski was there, and he was talking about how important the technocratic era would be, and how all of the electromagnetic EMF, VLF, all that stuff that the Pentagon and DARPA was pioneering, it would eventually be expanded into the mass population. What is the purpose? Ultimately, the purpose is for the cryptocracy to control the society at large. The control of reason. Millions of uncoordinated citizens easily would be within the reach of magnetic, attractive personalities in the media. They would exploit the latest communications techniques to manipulate emotion and to control reason. As Brzezinski ultimately said, this would release a horror and terror upon the American public, and this would be the technotronic society. And again, that's from one of the technocrats. So whether we view this book as an expose or a whitewash from the establishment, it still counts in the globalist book series. But there have been cases of, as we said, secret police harassment. East German Stasi would do this. And the 1977 New York Times article, the U.S. develops invisible weapons to enslave mankind, 1977. So the beginning of the book is psychotronic weapons, EMF, VLF, and PSYOPs. That's off and is likely propaganda in the book, is that the Chinese and Soviets were pioneering mind control and using drugs. That's not true. According to a lot of the research in this book, which makes me think that Boert is telling us a lot of truth, is that he notes that there's no evidence that the Soviets and the Chinese were really pioneering or using drugs in their mind control programs extensively. So there was a lot of mind control experimentation and programs post-World War II in communist countries, in the Soviet sphere. Mark Hackard has a piece he translated about psychic spies and Soviet mind control tests that you can read at Espionage History Archive. That's good. Spies, I think he called it. But they were not extensively using drugs. This was what the CIA in the West pioneered, not the Soviets. Now, that jibes perfectly with all the rest of the research that we've done over the last several years, doesn't it? That it was the Pentagon, the CIA, that was promoting the drug culture. Of course they were. They were promoting abstract art. They were promoting Blow Your Mind Out on Drugs, Tim Leary. And Boert covers all that. He says, the Manchurian Candidate was to become a reality less than a decade after Condon saw his story set in type. It's as if Condon's fiction was somehow a blueprint for hypno-programmed zombies that were to be created. Some of these appear to have been assassins who could kill on cue. Others were informers made to remember minute details under hypnosis. There were couriers who carried out illegal messages outside a chain of command, and their secrets were locked behind PHBs, or post-hypnotic blocks. One of these is going to be Candy Jones. Here's Candy, first of all, if you're not familiar with Candy Jones, famous story. She was big on the USO tour, right, back in the day. Let's see, Candy Jones ad. Let's see if that one comes up. The only reason I bring this up is because it shows that there it is. They were doing that all-seeing eye symbolism a long time ago. In pop culture, this wasn't something that was just kind of, invented in. Oh, damn it. Where'd it go? In our day. So she was one of the first test cases of this, the kind of the courier girl on the USO tour, in the circles. There's her, what is that? I don't know. Whatever makeup women do. Makeup, I don't know no damn makeup brands, but you can see here Candy Jones down at the bottom in her lipstick ads. Anyway. So there's Candy for you. And she was one of the first experimentees, at least the story goes. I'm not aware of a complete debunking of the Candy Jones story. There could be some debunking out there, but it seems to line up with what you read elsewhere. But we'll get to Candy here in a minute. So the justification was, well, we got to do all this because the commies are doing it, right? The commies are doing all this. We got to do all this. Are you starting to see a pattern here, right? Saddam's got weapons of mass destruction, so we got to preemptively strike. Well, the commies are doing all this mind control. We got to outdo them, and that's just what it takes to be an American. So they experimented first with the idea of people who had PTSD. Boert notes that the names of the programs would change. They just changed the names. How many times have I told you that it didn't go away? They just changed the names of the programs. Boert says that eventually it morphs into a lot of biochemical research. Yep, been telling you that. And it's inhumane. It results in a soul/mind rape is the problem with this. And that's because the people who rule this are a cult of intelligence. Yeah, that's a famous book, The Cult of Intelligence, right? Is that Victor Marchetti, I think? So all government agencies were at some or varying levels involved with this. It wasn't just the CIA. That's important to see that we think of this as the CIA's MKUltra program, and it's fine to say that, but it's important to understand that this included naval research. It included elements of the FBI, and that's why Boert, according to everything I've seen, Boert's the first to use the term cryptocracy, and this is the deep state. That's who the cryptocracy is. While the CIA, near the top of the pyramid of the intelligence world, has been drawing most of the fire, evidence of cryptocracy clearly implicates also the NSA. It also implicates the DIA, the Civil Service, the ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, Justice Department, Bureau of Prisons, Bureau of Narcotics, Atomic Energy Commission. What did I just say yesterday on Primal Edge Health? This. National Science Foundation. Exactly. Because it's mad scientists. And a host of private industries. So, sorry, libertarians, this is not a government problem. It's a corporate-public partnership problem. Private partnership problem. The cryptocracy invades the privacy of citizens and corporations. It meddles violently, oftentimes, in the internal policies of other nation states. It hires, trains, and equips mind-controlled assassins. It engages in coups, blah, blah, blah. This is the cryptocracy. It's not just Zionists, by the way. So that is our opening thesis, and I thought that was great. I did not know Boert was the first to use the term cryptocracy, unless somebody knows of an earlier usage of this. He goes on to say what is true and false in the Richard Condon works, and he says dreams do show suppressed memories of events. And then he's going to try to go into this. Now, this is the first kind of controversial thing, right? When we come to discussions of mind control, is does the programmed assassin, does he actually suppress memories? Is this true? Is this mind control fiction? So let's get a little bit of Manchurian going here. And ironically, this movie itself includes some people connected to mind control programs. Here we go with our predictive programming meta analysis here. Revelation of the method for old Frank Sinatra, FBI informant, if I recall, and BFF with all the mobsters. Why, what do you know? He's involved in the mind control movie, the premiere one, isn't he? No surprise there. So the idea of suppressed memories coming forth in dreams, the reason it ties into MKUltra is because they started researching, the Air Force was researching amnesia and hypnosis. And, oh, by the way, he talks about the possibility of people being sheep dipped. If you don't know what sheep dipped is, go watch the Corbett documentary on Timothy McVeigh. He says this is all real. We all know this kind of stuff is real. If we know that stuff is real, it's all mainline military history. Why does it seem strange that the rest of this stuff would be real? Skeptics out there. Right? So you can dispute to what degree or extent different aspects of this is real, but the overall thrust of this is not. It's not disputable. There's no debating it. So the first thing he did, he says, was he put out a story of a guy, or he put out stories in military magazines for guys who wanted to tell their story, but kind of do it on the down low, and he would change the names. And I don't. There's nothing in these stories that's unbelievable. There's no, super soldier. I was beamed to Mars, and I saw Nurgle, and Elvis on Mars, and we met up with a Bigfoot, and we beamed ourselves back from the future. None of that kind of bullshit that you hear on YouTube. They're all very realistic sounding stories. And the first one is that the guy who was one of the first, he thinks, experimentees in a secret Air Force base in Guam called the Marbo Facility. So I was not familiar with the Marbo Facility in Guam or near Guam. But he does talk about that already at this time the Air Force and the military was trying to collect files on everybody. And he said he was kind of blown away that they had files on the IQs of everyone. I don't know if he literally means everybody, but he was saying it seemed like everybody. And this is 60s, so I think this is 60s, yeah. He says they were already, doing computer analysis and research and getting computers to try to file everybody and basically profile. Now that's interesting because in the Prisoner series, and if you get Esoteric Hollywood 2, my Prisoner analysis will be in the book. If you haven't watched the Prisoner series, definitely something you need to see. One of the most powerful presentations of predictive programming, geopolitical dialectics being exposed, all in the 60s. It is truly an amazing TV show. Only 17 episodes. If you don't know about this, you don't know anything. You got to go watch The Prisoner, and you will see all of this laid out in detail. One of the things that's laid out in detail, by the way, here's the great picture that Mark Hackard made for one of my essays. Here that comes up right away. That's cool. Here we go. Yep. In The Prisoner, there's an episode. I think it's the episode called The General. I think it's a giant AI supercomputer that profiles everybody. And this is in the 60s. Now, I'm not saying that they had AI necessarily in the 60s that was able to do, like, super duper stuff, but the guy is saying that this is what they wanted to do. Well, obviously this is what did happen, so I find that to be pretty credible. Another thing that's shown in The Prisoner is all the MK Ultra stuff. Everything that is in this book is presented in fictional format in the 60s British spy show. Large-scale computer AI analysis, sex operatives, geopolitical dialectics. Prisoner shows that the Cold War is phony. Did you know that? Where the NATO used secretaries as sex operative honeypot covers. So that lines up with real testimonies in reality. So this guy's story seems very believable, and he had to do all kinds of things like robotically recall conversations. So they were trying to use his powerful memory to see if they could achieve total recall in terms of memory studies. So I would say that's plausible, that guy's story. Hypnosis, total recall, memory. Then in the next chapter, we have an interesting analysis of the Green Beret guy who was captured in 1963. And so he was a POW, and he talks about how what he was told would happen when he was caught by the Viet Cong was that they would do all this horrible stuff. And he said he was surprised that when he got caught, they didn't do anything of what he was told they would do. And they basically just told him the truth about how the U.S. lies and how it uses excuses for its expansionist imperialism, and that they don't use drugs. So he thought that they were going to undermine his morale and his self-image, and he said that the Russian and Eurasian approach to PSYOPs has pretty typically been to actually just tell the truth, in that it's actually the imperial ethos that is then forced to make up all the lies. I would say there's some truth to that. I think so. The CIA and the POW, in other words, what he goes on to argue is that the POW stuff, not that there have not been POWs, but that the Pentagon intentionally exaggerated the POW threat to justify all of this Cold War buildup and lies. And the U.S. is who used the drugs, not the Russians. It is the CIA that came up with the term brainwashing, and the term was used in the Cold War to say that this is what the Reds were doing. So now we got to do it to combat the Reds. You see the justification here. This was wide-scale propaganda. It was all Cold War fear. And this is fascinating because he says that the Rand Corporation and the Pentagon rolled out this psyop of mass Cold War fear, and then put out this line that all the troops who were critical of the U.S. were collaborators with the Reds. And you say, no, I find that hard to believe. Look at how it runs now. It runs the exact same, doesn't it? You're a Russian bot if you criticize the narrative. Can you believe that maybe it wasn't that different back then? Saddam is throwing babies out of incubators. We got to go invade there. Never mind all the other dictators in other countries. Never mind that the CIA trained Saddam and put him in power. Never mind all that. Just fall for the latest war propaganda. And so he talks about the POW PSYOP. I've often wondered if the POW stuff wasn't some level of PSYOP, but I never really found anybody extensively, documenting it. Oh, Rambo movies. They are prisoner of war PSYOPs, aren't they? Exactly. Oh, yeah, let's not forget John McCain. He fits perfectly into the POW PSYOP, doesn't he? Exactly. Things are starting to fall into place, so we're starting to realize, oh, wait a minute. Maybe all that Cold War gobbledygook that the OSS was spilling, and it was the OSS who began all the large-scale media PSYOPs at CBS and NBC. They're all OSS men who started that. Let's see. Here's an interesting tie-in. Henry Cabot Lodge, who according to Quigley was one of the banksters' agents. The CIA memo from 1953 addressed the chief of the CIA's plans and preparations, and it contained a report of an exchange that took place between the UN ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge and an unidentified CIA agent. The CIA agent began to brief Lodge on the germ warfare confessions of Schwabel and others, who, according to the memo, expressed a profound distaste for the entire matter, the difficulty of explaining away the film and the statements of the American POWs, blah blah blah. Basically, the line of the POWs was not matching up with what the Pentagon wanted. Is the purpose of all this. So, and then he goes to talk about how it wasn't the Viet Cong and the Reds that were using chemical biological agents. It was actually germ warfare developed by the Pentagon to be used in the Korean War, and I covered that extensively in Pentagon's Brain. Right, Agent Orange and all that. Again, these countries did not have the capabilities. Next, we talk about Dr. George Estabrooks. We've covered him extensively. He was a pioneer hypnotist. In the 40s, he claimed to be able to... So Estabrooks, he's the one who claimed that he could do the hypnotic courier stuff. He says he could create the sleeper cell agent and all this stuff. And it's kind of debated to what degree Estabrooks was really able to do this. However, what was relevant in terms of the establishment's perspective was the behaviorist approaches to these experiments. And so this is where we begin to see that the Rockefeller funding of B.F. Skinner that we talked about last night on Primal Edge Health, the Rockefeller funding of J.B. Watson and J.G. Watkins, who was a hypnotist. The idea was that through hypnosis, you could create and change people's worldviews. You could change their inner structures of belief through hypnosis, and then of course later drugs, right? You could also implant memories. This is what the hypnotists were claiming. You could put people into trance states. So you have all this decades and decades of hypnosis research that is also tied into MK Ultra. And the way this could be easily relevant to people losing their shit and becoming shooters or killers or madmen is that it's said that some of these people were highly susceptible, and if you changed their worldviews, you could make them into extremely antisocial individuals who might lose their mind. So it doesn't require... There's another prisoner image, by the way, showing the global dialectic of the grand chessboard of Brzezinski. If you could put people into these hypnotic medicated states, you don't have to have, some killer assassin brought into some lab somewhere. All you got to do is have them sitting watching TV all day, dosed on SSRIs, and put into catatonic trance states through television and all the frequencies. And you're going to have a whole population of potential madmen killers. We've seen recent events, haven't we, of supposed patsies and individuals. I can't mention those events or YouTube will just shut things down. So, but events, we'll call the events. There have been events. So anyway, the idea was, who cares about individual dum-dums? Let's figure out how to make this into large-scale social engineering, changing people's paradigms. I don't care about some individual dum-dum or individual bum-bum on hobos on the street. The demon hobos of Twin Peaks and Prince of Darkness. We don't care about them. We want to turn the population into possessed hobos. Soviet tests were, according to him, somewhat lagging behind. They weren't up on all the drug stuff. Rand Corporation put out a study about hypnosis and the implanting of false memories a long time ago. The Rand report outlined the procedure of eliciting false confessions, implanted memories. Oh, get this. And how to put people into hypnotic states through sounds. And how to create fake guilt through fake confessions. So don't always believe a defector's confession. Interesting. Why manipulating and putting people into trance states through sound vibrations and different sounds, that sounds like ASMR, doesn't it?
When I chew my gum, do you get tingles? I'm a YouTube skank. I'm a gamer YouTube skank. Give me $100 because I'm making you tingle. I'm never gonna like you. I'm never gonna email you, but give me your Patreon dollars. I'm a YouTube skank with 5 million subscribers. I'm chewing juicy fruit.
Apparently that's what I need to do. That's what I guess I'm not hot enough to be a YouTube skank, but actually if I put on girls' clothes, I would probably go over very well, and I would get 5 million subscribers, and I could chew gum. I could chew gum and make $10,000 a show. What is wrong with people? What is your major malfunction? Electroshock also being used at this early stage. Yeah, we knew about that. This is interesting. What does he say is the goal of all this? The creation of the zombie. The zombie. The creation of the zombie. He was writing this in the 1970s. Could you imagine, by the way, like if you read this book back then? I mean, it's even still, you talk about this stuff, people think you're nuts. They're kind of catching on, right? But could you imagine talking about this in the 70s? People would be like, you are insane. Get out of here. LSD and Ritalin were studied. Next, we get into the Sandoz Pharmaceutical Corporation. We know about that. That's in Jay Stevens' book. That's in countless books on the subject. That's been public for a long time in mainstream books. The CIA had plans to purchase 10 kilograms in 1953 of LSD. 100 million doses eventually is what they wanted. Tons of LSD purchased for LSD warfare. Sandoz Laboratories produced this. We also know about the Owsley character that Dave McGowan mentions, the whole story of Owsley. Good grief, that song sucks. Do you think the projected future tech was brought to these elite from beyond the veil? Hence the ability to see the coming future so far in the past. I do think that there's an element to the possibility of getting inspiration or insight through occulted means. So in many cases, this could be, if you look at somebody like Jack Parsons, he was believing that he was receiving his rocketry insights through his ritual magic workings. So there are some people in the occult. There are people who, Watson and Crick, they think that one of them was tripping when he got the idea for the double helix, right? So I would say, yes, the secrets of nature can at times be cracked by contacting that realm and receiving inspiration. And quite a few, actually, people have said this. Aldous Huxley talked this way. They think that it's inspiration from entities. Facebook is designed to predispose people to mental disorders. Yeah, we just talked about. Yes, we're over 300. We just talked about that with Primal Edge Health yesterday. Making users become NPCs. Yes, listen to the Primal Edge talk from yesterday's, and he talks about the biofeedback loop. And that goes back to this. Can you believe it? Goes back to this. Because this morphs into biotech, electronic implants, implantable microchips. It all comes from MK Ultra. Did you know that? Yes, it does. JF $20. What about the Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Aleister Crowley connection? Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. When Parsons was doing his Babylon workings, which he saw science combined with ritual magic basically being the same thing. There's the attempts to bring about the Antichrist, attempts to bring about the end times, all this goofy stuff, because they think that. I mean, I've talked about this over and over and over. This because they think that the Book of Revelation is a magical text. It's not a magical text. It's not a text that shows you how to invoke entities. It's a book about the collapse of the Roman Empire and the establishment of the church in the first century. That's what it's about. But they don't know. But anyway, yes, there is absolutely a connection between ritual magic and science in the person of Parsons. Hubbard, of course, comes out of the Crowleyan ethos. We get Scientology as an offshoot after he graduates from the Cult Creation College. That's what Crowleyanism is the college of how to create your own cult. That's why all the people who graduate from it, they just magically happen to start their own cult, like Gerald Gardner and Wicca, like Parsons or Hubbard and Scientology. So, and then what? Hubbard steals Parsons' wife, Marjorie Cameron, and all the drama and all that. So yes, but all that gobbledygook is one example of one aspect to which you can look at ritual magic and science colliding. And there's a story too, if I recall, the person who did the Hubble telescope, maybe Hubble, is it Hubble? I don't know. Isn't the story that he did DMT or shrooms? And one of the Clockwork Elves, I'm not joking, I think this is the story. It may be bullshit, but I think this is the story. The Clockwork Elves told him to go ask the Rockefellers for a grant to build the Hubble telescope. I think that's right. But you hear all kinds of stories like this, right? And again, Double Helix, they were tripping acid when they came up with that. New England Publishing $20. Do you have a take on David Foster Wallace? No, all my friends have read David Foster Wallace. I've read his essays, some of them. I've read his big fat books. I read he has a good analysis of David Lynch, like Lynch movies. I thought that was a neat essay. I've been listening to his ideas about the repercussions of ironic 90s culture. Yeah, I read some of that. But he never came with a proper solution. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know a whole enough about that. Jay, what is the plan for the proletariat once the plutocracy successfully brings everyone into a world government? By the way, we're going to get back to, we still got some more of this to do. But what is the plan? Well, the working class is to be replaced by robots. That's the plan for the proletariat. And then eventually get herded into the mega cities, the big smart cities, because that's the only place where you'll be allowed to live and work, but you'll increasingly not have work, so you'll be on some kind of government AI credit system. That's the plan. It's Jacques Attali. Listen to my Jacques Attali talk. He's the one that seems to outline this the most clearly. Next we come to Creepo Tim Leary. And everybody needs to see that Leary says, I'm the continuation of Aleister Crowley. Did you know he said that? Yes. So old Tim and his tune in, drop out gobbledygook what a clown this guy is. He's so anti-establishment. He's only like the most establishment person imaginable. Is what he thinks of you. And yeah, I knew about Tim Leary and his CIA stuff long time ago. The exposés on Leary and the Rolling Stones and LSD. And that was back in 2003. So this has been going around on the internet for a long time. This whole CIA being behind hippie stuff. It's not new. It was in various books. It's in this book from 1978. But in terms of the internet sphere, not the book sphere. Then the LaRouche Group, LaRouche PAC, the Schuyler Institute, they had a whole bunch of essays that are really good on Bertrand Russell, Royal Society, all that. That's all true. That doesn't mean that the LaRouche organization is legit, or I don't follow any of that. But by the way, Buckminster Fuller, Buckyballs, Buckminster Fuller was part of Esalen Institute. I'm not saying that makes everything he says bad, but here's old Tim on late night PBS or whatever. Let's get my screenshot for you. And I can't believe people don't know this. Here's the screenshot for you.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said he was in favor of finding your own self and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law under love. It was a very powerful statement. I'm sorry he isn't around now to appreciate the glories that he started.
The glories. Yeah, all that NAMBLA glory, right? And Leary is out of Harvard. It's obvious that he is a CIA plant. He's there to do his job. And he creates the LSD cult. They already knew it was going to be a cult. Leary and company retreated to Mexico, where they attempted to carry on LSD experiments outside of the government's purview. Yeah, right. Outside of the FBI or something, but under the CIA purview. In 1963, they made the Mexican government mad. They moved from Mexico to Millbrook, New York, and established a front called the International Federation for International Freedom, which was a propaganda outfit for the promotion of LSD. Later became the Castalia Foundation. Leary dosed himself all the time. His talks were all made for true believers in the new LSD cult. Always somewhat naive, he predicted that there would come a day when a new profession of psychedelic guides by the establishment, the medical establishment, would give you psychedelic guides to supervise your occult experiences, your handlers. You would get a government psychiatric medical handler to help you. This is actually being promoted now. They're talking about how guided PhD psychologist, psychiatrist, drug trip people will heal you from all of your maladies and your traumas. You're right. He went and he was an evangelist for this at all the colleges. Everybody knows this. And there was a large contingent of people that were not happy with the fact that he was promoting mass drugging and initiatory experiences through LSD. And so how did he convince everybody that they need to be doing this? Well, of course, it's still illegal, but that just made it have its mystique. How did Leary convince everybody? By selling it as a right. Same thing that they do for everything, right? The man's keeping you down, keeping you away from your right to pour Drano in your eyes. The man is trying to keep you down, trying to not let you have your right to be blind. The man is trying to keep you down, not let you have your right to kill your offspring. Quite literally, and it works, right? So he sold it as a right. It didn't technically become legal, although I think eventually it will be legal. LSD has a close connection to the drug experimentation and trafficking of the Vietnam War. And everybody knows that the trafficking of heroin in Southeast Asia was a CIA operation, Golden Triangle. U.S. government ran the heroin, and they do in Afghanistan now. The idea here was, let's use addiction. Let's experiment with what happens when people get addicted. So all of your GIs that were given all these drugs, they were being given the drugs on purpose by the wicked establishment. Your government and your corporate leaders do not love you. But they were using prisoners. The Army announced that since 1956, and this is just what they're publicly saying, they had given LSD to 1,500 unwitting servicemen. And including volunteers, 6,940. Some of these drugs, according to the Defense Department, were more powerful than LSD. So you wonder why there's the crazy vets wandering around the streets and stuff. And by the way, sometimes if you talk to the crazy vets that are like wandering around everybody's town, every town has these, they will tell you that they were given drugs by the government, and you know, most people are like, oh hell yeah, the government gave you drugs. They probably did, dude. They probably did. So, 2,500 mental patients by 1954 had been experimented on. And eventually, as I've said many times, it becomes the Army's chemical weapons program. It morphs into that. Edgewood Arsenal, Fort Detrick. Then it goes into talking about the results of all these studies, people having flashbacks. They studied all these experiences. This is all well known. If you don't know about all this, if you just trust what the system says, these ignorant people that argue with me, this has been studied to the nth detail. You think the military and the government don't know? They're the ones that gave it to you. You don't think they know what this does? Stop being naive. And some guys, these idiots that argue with me about this and say that, oh, this is all good. It's all good. Depersonalization. One of the first things that comes up. Depersonalization. And what was that dumb boomer on Twitter arguing with me saying? What's wrong with depersonalization? He said, you assume that depersonalization is a bad thing. The boomer guru, I'm not joking, boomer guru is trying to argue with me on Twitter. The boomer guru, that depersonalization is not a bad thing. Bluebird, if you've heard, this is often brought up. We're going to keep our boomer guru up here with his rolling his eyes. Ugh. Bluebird assigned the function of discovering the means of conditioning personnel to prevent unauthorized extraction and information. So it was the control of an individual by the application of interrogation techniques. It was renamed Artichoke. It was subsequently transferred to the Office of Scientific Intelligence, and then to the however, it retained the responsibility for evaluating foreign intelligence aspects. In 1953, it became they pioneered the LSD experiments. Okay, so Bluebird Artichoke premieres LSD experimentation. Choke, MK Delta, MK Ultra, MK Search, yeah, all extends from this. Dr. Richard Helms, Mr. Helms, famous CIA guy, is who destroyed many of the papers supposedly on this. The Vacaville facility was part of MK Ultra. The Vacaville medical facility experimented with human guinea pigs. Dave McGowan goes into Vacaville. They experimented with mass drugging, angry young men. looked for prisoners and mental institute people who were angry young men, and they mass drugged them. So by the 60s and 70s, prisons and psychiatric mental institutes were constantly experimenting on humans as part of MK Ultra. Hypnosis, electroshock, drugs, on and on and on and on. Human Ecology Foundation, we covered that in the John Marks talk and book. Some of the institutions that were connected to MK research include the Department of Health, the National Institutes of Mental Health, Department of Labor, National Science Foundation, Veterans Administration. Interesting. Veterans. Then he goes on to cite John Marks's book. Rand Corporation put out studies on drugs and LSD. I think we talked about that earlier. Here's an interesting one, and this will be in Esoteric Hollywood too. Remember the movie? Obi-Wan Kenobi plays Cardinal Menzinski, the prisoner, not connected to the British TV show. This movie is Cold War propaganda. I started realizing that, here it is. If you watch this movie, there's mind control stuff in this movie. And I remember back when I was a trad Catholic, I was like, oh yeah, that movie's so good. I love that movie. Now I think it's ridiculous because it's obviously just transparent Cold War propaganda. If you watch The Prisoner with Alec Guinness, you don't need to see identification. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Move along. Move along. Move along. How's my Obi-Wan? Is it still good? These aren't the droids you're looking for. What's some more Obi-Wan lines I could do? Anyway, these 50s movies are Cold War propaganda. Did you know that? Anyway, there'll be a whole chapter on that in my new book. People don't think about the Fatima, Prisoner, Bernadette, all those Catholic movies in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. These are Cold War propaganda. And this ties into the CIA's doctrinal warfare program, the David Wim Hof book. But, and I don't doubt that commies messed with Cardinal Menzinski. But I don't think that it's exactly the way the movie presents it, right? Because it backs up the Chinese brainwashing Cold War stuff. Anyway, so he has a good take on all that. He basically backs up the analysis of Wim Hof in John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and a book everybody has to read because the trad mythos is so delusional and strong. Because, by the way, do you know they were tripping acid too? Jesuits tripping acid with JFK and the elite. Yes, sir. Yes, they were. Everybody should read this book. This book is central to understanding the 20th century. And this is written by trad. It's not written by Orthodox conspiracy theorists. It's not written by a lunatic guy in his tinfoil hat facility in a trailer park. It's written by a Catholic lawyer. Oh, by the way, body language lie detectors, that all comes out of MK Ultra. Did you know that? So then we have the story of Candy Jones. Candy was originally, as we said, she was a model, and in the midst of her modeling, she was asked to deliver some packages by some FBI general type. There's a general or some FBI guy, I can't remember. And she was like, okay, I'll do that for my country. And they, you know, it was all, oh, for your country. All right. So she starts delivering packages, and turns out they're like, well, we like what you do. You're good at what you do. Let's move you to a different facility. I have a friend here who wants you to meet you. He's from the CIA. So she goes to help with the CIA and the Air Force. And she joins the USO. And I am starting to think that, I'm sorry about this stupid song. I'm starting to think that the Bob Hope mind control USO, I think there's something to that. I think Bob Hope was like a mind control handler. I think that's probably true. I don't have like a perfect history of Bob Hope, but that picture I had of Candy Jones earlier, that's her in her USO outfit. And by the way, doesn't this all kind of match up with the plot and narrative of Alias? I just remembered that. And by the way, I do have an Alias analysis from a long time ago, which is worth checking out. But yes, it does match up to Alias. Interesting. Forgot about Alias. But yes, the CIA consulted on Alias. Absolutely. So, but I would say most of what we hear in the Candy Jones story seems legit, right? It's very believable. There's nothing outlandish in it. There's no crazy stories. She appears to have had alters. She appears to have undergone trauma. And Marnie. This immediately makes me think of Marnie. If you've not seen Hitchcock's Marnie, you must. Because Tippy in Marnie sounds just like Candy Jones. Like the stories of Candy Jones and her husband's stories about her, they sound just like Marnie. And if you watch Marnie, you'll know what I'm talking about, because Sean Connery starts dating. By the way, Hitchcock always has mind control stuff in his movies. He's always got MK Ultra alters. That's like everywhere in his movies. But Sean Connery, he's like dating this bipolar crazy chick, and he can't figure out what's going on. And then he realizes spoiler alert, she keeps reverting back to her childlike state when she was traumatized as a kid. I'm not going to spoil anything else, but basically Candy Jones had the exact same issue, and her alter was called Arlene, and she thinks it was the one that was given to her by her handler. She also says her handler in the CIA was openly satanic. So again, things do seem to be lining up, don't they? We did a show on Marnie, by the way. Jamie and I have an old Esoteric Hollywood episode on Marnie, if you want to hear that. But her handler develops her alter personality into what it's supposed to be. By the way, if you doubt the reality of alternate personalities, I would say watch this old. Let's see if it's still on YouTube. I always tell people to watch it. I need to put this on the website. There's an old YouTube. It's an old HBO documentary. Let's see if this is it. On DID and dissociative identity disorder. Oh, you can also read Colin Ross's book, Osiris Complex, which I have analysis of. But I've watched a whole bunch of these, and I find the HBO documentary to be the most convincing if you were a skeptic. But I'm not seeing it. Let's try to see HBO DIDMPD. Let's try that. Is that it? That might be it. Yes, here it is. So it's multiple personality disorder / documentary, and it's an old HBO documentary. It's had like 2 million views. That's it. I do recommend this one if you're a skeptic to this topic. I found it to be pretty convincing, because a lot of people think that this is just baloney. It doesn't exist. CIA and all these entities, they seem to believe it exists. That's it. If you want to watch it, I recommend that documentary. I found it to be pretty convincing. But I've also read multiple books on this topic too. Not just Colin Ross's book, but also Switching Time. I forget that guy's name, but Switching Time is another book that's good on this. So we talked about all the handler stuff. This gets into the typical, the keywords can bring forth the alternate personality. It seems like there's something to that. It seems like that's legit. You know, John C. Lilly talks like he was successful at that. We get stories similar to Vertigo, Hitchcock's Vertigo, right? With the chick who has alternate personalities for Jimmy Stewart. Candy Jones claims she was tortured. And then we get another of the classic mind control MK Ultra tropes, the suicide programming. Is this real? Well, Candy Jones claims it was real. She claims that she was given suicide programming, that in the event of certain things happening, blah, 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 her being found out, her spilling too many beans, or at a certain date, age 30, 35, 40, she's supposed to kill herself. She claims some connection to Agent Intrepid, Sir William Stevenson, one of the key founders of the OSS, along with Bill Donovan, British agent. Canadian intelligence, British intelligence, same thing. William Stevenson. And there's bizarre parallels to Dr. William Jennings Bryan, the CIA's famous hypnotist, or CIA-connected hypnotist. So she claimed to have been known to and by and connected to all these characters. And again, it's not hard to believe. She's obviously, like supermodel level. I don't think she was in any movies, but she's, she's in, USO. And there's an interesting clip that Ken Emme, true free thinker, he has a really interesting video that he put together based on an old Bob. I've never watched I don't think I've ever seen a Bob Hope movie, so I don't know like anything about Bob Hope movies. And he puts forth the thesis, which I think is entirely plausible, that Bob Hope, and by the way, I think Bryce Taylor says this too, right? She's another one of these gals that says this. I don't know about, here it is. Bob Hope, MK Ultra hidden in plain sight. That's an interesting possibility. Check out that video. It's worth watching. That Ken did. Already had like 100,000 views. So I'll put this in the chat. I think a lot of people don't find that one convincing. I think it is it's plausible when you read the Candy Jones story. So then we have he gives a chapter on the history of the cryptocracy, goes into Wild Bill Donovan, founding of the OSS, FDR, Bankerman behind all this. institutionalized secrecy for the cryptocracy. He talks about Miles Copeland, cites Miles Copeland, all the guys we've covered. So the OSS is set up in tandem with British intelligence. We all know this, 1942. And they pioneer Psy-War. They're the cryptocracy. They're connected to British intelligence. Colonel Prouty, the secret team, we know about this, right? Secret team discusses, he was part of that cryptocracy. Oliver Stone read Prouty. This, in part, inspires a lot of the Stone movies. And what the Cold War did was release Skinnerian, Rockefeller behaviorism, operant conditioning, and the cryptocracy upon the whole world. So that's the first half of Walter Bowart's Operation Mind Control. So in the second half, we will see how the Cold War released cryptocracy on the whole world in a more clear sense. I would like to dive deeper into the Bob Hope thing, see if he... I would give it a 90% chance Bob Hope was a mind control handler, and he's probably had all these chicks as sex slaves, right? I mean, probably pretty obvious that's what he's doing here. We live in a giant MK Ultra culture. MK pop culture. That's what we live in. So anyway,